Hey VC, Big Star 1000 with a video about my recent trip to France, but I also got to spend a week in Spain in I think the second week of January, and I went to southern Spain by myself, Andalusia. Wonderful towns. I started in Granada, which you can see here, to see the almighty Alhambra, which is a complex of palaces built in the time of the Moorish invasions. Very, very impressive, in fact, mind blowing. And then I went to Cordoba, which was a lovely little town with the mezquita, which was exquisite, really, and ended up in Seville. And it was in Seville that I found some record shops that I wanted to visit. I wasn't really going to Spain for records, but I found a couple. This record store called Latimore Records was probably the best of the pick. I spent a couple of hours there. Didn't really buy very much, but they had a decent selection of records and some really unusual things. But when I go overseas, I tend to just look at the records from the country. In this case, Spanish records. And there were a few, for example, this Battalion LP, but 70 euros was too much for me. I ended up picking up this record by Jordi Sabates, solo record. Amazing, amazing jazz fusion, prog, Spanish record. A masterpiece, in my opinion. And the next day, I got to visit the Seville Flea Market, and which you'll see in a second, which was a bit of a letdown because there were not that many records, lots of junk and other old antiques. And don't get me wrong, I love flea markets, but I was there for records, and there wasn't that much that I wanted to buy. Only that common stuff that you would find anywhere, you know. But that's not what I was going there for. I also visited a thrift store, and I think that was even worse in some cases. There's lots of records there, but really a lot of it was just overpriced junk. Really, um, I mean, it was good to dig for a while. I guess the flamenco section was probably the most interesting. Although I am a total flamenco philistine, I must admit. I mean, I know Paco de Lucia, I know Cameron, and I know a few other names like that, but I'm just not really knowledgeable. There might have been some gems, but I couldn't tell. And it's not really a type of music that I actively listen to either. So the shop also had some bric-a-brac and stereo equipment and other stuff like that. But in the end, I knew I was going to Paris later, and I knew that I had to save my luggage space uh, because Paris is full of delights records wise. So I went to Paris after this. Well, not really quite after that. So my first spot of digging in Paris was at the Fnac in Les Halles, which is in central Paris. Fnac is a chain of shops that sell books, records, CDs, video games, comics, all sorts of media. It's like your one-stop culture shop in France. They're almost in every city, and the one in Les Halles, which is in central Paris, is just amazing. It's just huge supermarket of culture, really, basically. And the thing with Fnac is they actively support culture. They're not just a shop where you're going to buy stuff. They are really at the forefront of cultural events in France. And I spent 2 hours in there. I didn't want to buy too much in there, because basically I was going to the flea market the next day and I knew I was going to find some other stuff. But anyway, here's a bit of footage. My camera work is not the best because I'm sort of like trying not to be seen by the by the shop assistants. You know how it is when you film in a store. You feel a bit self-conscious. Anyway, you can think of any album at that place, and you can probably find it either on vinyl or on CD if you're not a CD snob. Here is the sort of jazz slash indie section. You gotta like reissues. If you're not into reissues, there's no point. Anyway, the first record that I bought from there was this wonderful record from Mali, Balaké Sissoko and Vincent Segal, which is a duet of uh, Cora and cello. Amazing, amazing record. And on the same label, no format, I also took a punt on this Toto Bona Lukua called Bondeko, which is kind of this mellow, languid vocal singer-songwriter record from Africa and the West Indies. I shall talk about it in more detail in my next installment of Revolutions. I also picked up a couple of CDs. This is Florent Pellissier Quintet on Heavily Witness. This is spiritual jazz, French spiritual jazz, if you will. Florent Pellissier, I think he's quite well known in the VC. His first album, Biche Bleu, was quite a hit in the VC back in the day. And a couple of records from the label Born Bad Records. This is Groupe Douai and Cheveux. Groupe Douai are from Mali, and Cheveux are a French band, so it's a mix of rock and kind of sort of North African traditional music. Here's the name of the band in a second. There you go if you want to know. And finally, I also got a very strange record, kind of a hardcore meets gospel meets, I don't know, black metal meets. It's a very, very strange record, JC Satan, which is also on Born Bad Records. And I am a big, big fan of Born Bad Records. It's a Parisian label, and they release a lot of really cool and interesting new things. And I've spoken about, for example, Forever Pavo. The next day, I headed north to Porte de Clignancourt for the flea market, the Paris flea market. And the Paris flea market is a fixed market. It's not one that comes and goes. It's open on certain days, and it was open that day. It was very, very cold. So this first part that you see is the Marché Dauphiné, which is a shed full of records basically. And I didn't really find much until I found this store here that you can see on the picture, which is where I bought all the things that I will show you later. But amazing kind of place to visit, and if you're in Paris. And then I went to this other store that you can see, a Disque du Yeti. Disque du Yeti was a bit further out in the flea market, and it was just stacked with amazing records. The 45 RPM section alone is worth going for. So I spent like a good hour there digging and looking at things, and I saw records I'd never seen anywhere before. For instance, on the wall there you can see the Jazz Groupe de Bretagne, which is just an amazingly rare record. I mean, it was €200, mind you, so I didn't buy that, but if I were rich, you never know. But a great store to visit. There's an original Igor Vakovich on the wall there. Really, Potemkin, Yeti by Amandul. And this is just a little bit of a dig in their French prog section, just to show you some common things, but there's also some things that you don't see very often. There's an original of Helden Interface, Chemin Blanc, some great French prog folk, Jean-Pierre Alarcen, with urban sax, some really nice French progressive records. Not that I collect them anymore these days, but it's cool to just look and dig. And in this stack, I actually found a really nice record. There it is. I'll talk about it in a little while, but I picked it up. It was really cool to find. And no, I had a superb time looking at these records. So in the first part of the video at the Marché Dauphiné, I picked up this original copy of my favorite record of all time. If you've been following this channel, you know that Histoire de Melody Nelson is my favorite album, and I was really happy to find this in the wild and pay the money, and I just really love this record to death. So what can I say? In the same shop, I came across two copies of Claude Perraudin's Mutation 24. Amazing kind of library prog, kind of funky record. Just a really, really sick record. Very highly recommended, and strongly encourage people to go and have a listen on YouTube if you haven't heard this record. But yeah, European grooves, really big time. I also found an OG copy of this Sivuca LP, kind of Brazilian folk rock. No, well, actually samba rock. Really difficult to get record, but a beautiful, beautiful album by Sivuca. Got a great rendition of Ain't No Sunshine by Bill Withers on it. Really take a listen. It's amazing. A Brazilian record. And I also scored another Brazilian record, which is an absolute grail. I don't know if this word is overused, but this is Gilberto Gil Expresso 2222, the original Brazilian press with the gimmick cover. When I do my revolutions, I will show you the whole fold-out cover, because it's just an amazing. It's a work of art, and the record itself is just knockout. It's a brilliant, brilliant record. And no wonder it's expensive, because it's really great. I got this Cameroon LP as well, Pasteur Lapé, on Disque Espérance, the label where Cortex is, the mighty French band. This record is just brilliant. Gareth Fitzpatrick turned me on to this. Clivage, which you saw in the video, which is kind of Euro grooves, kind of progressive, lots of harpsichord, Middle Eastern instruments, just like it's a killer record, an absolute monster record. Elie and Jacquenot, some French synth pop from the 80s. Elie Medeiros, she was from Uruguay, very, very beautiful girl, and she sings. And Jacquenot was in a French band Stinking Toys, and he does the synth. And I'll talk about Elie Medeiros in a little bit. The only non sort of French record, well, except for the Brazilian ones, the Nits, Giant Normal Dwarf from 1990. Shout out to Stefan73, great Dutch band, indie pop, art pop. This amazing Moshe Naim record. So Joshko Seffert from Zao and Magma, and Siegfried Kessler on keys, playing Monk, Thelonious Monk tunes. Monk Forever, it's called. Amazing, amazing record. Beautiful. Sort of Euro jazz fusion. And in the Disque du Yeti, one of the owners curated this compilation, Parler d'amener de la terre, which is a French language protest song compilation. Amazing stuff, a little bit spiritual as well. Features Colette Mani, Pierre Akedengue, Francis Bébé, like lots of singular voices. Beautiful stuff. In the evening, Jack Sundag, aka Jack Sunday on Instagram, who is a VC viewer and comments on videos but doesn't make videos, invited me to his apartment in North Paris, and we had a great time. We had dinner and we chatted and we played records and we just clowned around and just chatted generally about life in France because he's American but he lives in Paris. So we had a great evening. Thank you, Jack. I brought Jack a record you can see here, the Might Life debut album, uh, as a gift, and I didn't expect anything in return, but he insisted on gifting me this record here that you can see, the Armitage Road LP by the Eshu Beshu group. If you're in the know about this is killer South African jazz, really groovy, funky jazz from South Africa, really hard to get record and pricey. I was very embarrassed that he gave me this because I didn't really expect anything. I was quite happy to just have a conversation with him. And it just so I mean I've played this tons of times already. I'm stoked. And then he also gave me a couple of cheap heat. This is a hi-fi performance. Sorry for the poor lighting. It's a French kind of groovy library record, which is quite nice. And this American jazz funky fusion record by Pat Williams, Threshold, which I've played a couple of times. It's quite funky and quite pleasant to listen to. So thank you, Jack. That was awesome. The next day, I took a small pilgrimage to Serge Gainsbourg's house, located on 5 Rue de Verneuil, which is in near the Latin Quarter. You can see it's snowing that day. It's always nice to just pay tribute to the great man of French chanson, and you can see the great murals and the tributes left by fans from all around. And on Jack's advice, I then uh, went to this new store called Listen Records near the Oberkampf metro station. Small store, but stacked with really great stuff. Even the bargain bins were amazing. And this store is run by Thomas Pasquet from French Attack. You can see him there in the middle, who released the Rupture LP a couple of years ago. In Listen Records, I picked up a couple of albums. Dominique Blanc-Francard, Ailleurs, which is a 1972 kind of French prog psych meets French chanson. It's kind of an oddity. It was on my want list and it was quite cheap. And I've been really enjoying it since I've come back. So I was glad to find that. And this spectacular French spiritual jazz record by Michel Roch. His records are very difficult to track down. This is a radio station copy of his LP Impact, where he appears to be blowing onto a lightsaber, Darth Vader style. But this is a great record, and his other records, which I really want, is almost impossible to find. And a couple of Elie Medeiros 7-inch records, hit singles from the 80s. I talked about it just before. She was this Uruguayan siren, and these two singles, especially this one, Toi Mon Toi, big hits in France in the 1980s. I remember that well, actually. After Listen Records, I wandered to the République Square, which is a very symbolic place where people gather to protest, and I just thought I'd just take a little touch of footage, of Paris, because Paris is really wonderful. And a stone's throw from République is the wonderful Superfly Records, who you probably already know or have heard of because they release tons of amazing records. And so I spent a little bit of time in Superfly, not very long. It's mostly a soul, funk, jazz, well grooves record store. Very small rock selection, but really worth the detour. It's fantastic. So in Superfly, I was stoked to come across a cheap copy of Fawzi El Ayadi Silence, which I was looking for. Amazing Iraqi oud player and singer. Just very, very, you know, very happy to find it because I was looking for it. And I took a punt, a really nice punt on this Oswald D'Andrea LP, which is basically a bit like Jacques Lussier, like a Baroque jazz trio playing kind of, yeah, this kind of classical meets jazz kind of record. And it was only like €10, which, you know, it was peanuts, and it was really well worth the efforts because it's a really nice record. So there you go. This was my digs from Paris. Leave me some comments and talk to me, VC. Love you all.